Today's video is sponsored by Keeps. Did you know that 2 out of every 3 guys are going to experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35? Sure do, Keeps, sure do. For me, it was more like 25. Look, I wish Keeps had been around when I was a younger man, because advancements in science have meant that there are now treatments that can combat the symptoms of hair loss and help you keep the hair that you have. It's too late for me. My hair is gone. It is not coming back, but you don't have to be like me. You can stop your hair loss early thanks to Keeps. Keeps offers generic versions of the only 2 FDA-approved drugs for treating hair loss. So you might have tried them before, but you've never tried them at a price this low. That's right, if you were thinking, oh, this is medicine whistle, it's going to be expensive, well, you couldn't be more wrong. Keeps starts at just $10 a month. Yes! So how does it work? Well, for one thing, no need to go to the doctor's office. Quick online consult, you schedule a bit later. Whoosh, discreet package arrives, open it up, use it in the privacy of your own home. Perfect. So, if you're noticing that you're losing your hair, look up there. It's going backwards. That's a problem that's not going to fix itself. Do something about it for a limited time. Go to keeps.com/brainfood or just click the link in the description below if you're feeling lazy and you'll receive 50% off your first order. Again, keeps.com/brainfood. And now today's video. War, they say, makes strange bedfellows. Never was this more true than during the Second World War, when many former bitter enemies formed uneasy alliances in the service of ultimate victory. For instance, the Soviet Union entered the war aligned with Nazi Germany, the 2 ideological enemies carving up Poland between them in September 1939. 2 years later, Hitler turned on Stalin and invaded the Soviet Union, whereupon the Soviets, despite their previous actions, became Britain and America's greatest ally. But this conflict also brought together internal enemies, uniting opposition factions with common patriotic purpose. Such was the case in the United States, where, in perhaps the ultimate case of strange bedfellows, the government teamed up with the Mafia to help win the war. In the 1930s and 1940s, there were 2 dominant mafia groups in the United States. Those run by the Italians, mainly Sicilians, and those run by Jews. While the Sicilian Mafia can trace its origins to informal and ancient resistance movements against Sicily's various conquerors, the modern American organization was the product of fascist dictator Benito Mussolini's rise to power in the 1920s. As a northerner, Mussolini was highly unpopular in Sicily, and the various mafia clans put up a determined resistance to his rule on the island. Mussolini, in turn, saw the Mafia as a challenge to his power, and tasked his right-hand man, Cesare Mori, with arresting, imprisoning, and humiliating Mafia dons and other key members. These purges resulted in a mass exodus of mafioso to the United States, where they quickly established themselves as a persistent thorn in the side of American law enforcement. The Mafia infiltrated itself into a wide variety of enterprises, from bootlegging during Prohibition to more legitimate pursuits like the seafood market and politics. New laws had to be invented to counter the Mafia's growth, but even these barely put a dent in their operations. Indeed, by the 1960s, the American Mafia's annual revenues were estimated at $7 billion. Yet despite their antagonistic relationship with their adopted country, most American mafioso maintains the hatred for Mussolini and his fascist government. This was in stark contrast to many non-Mafia-affiliated Italian Americans who continued to see Mussolini as a folk hero. The Fascist League of North America was founded by Italian immigrants in 1925 and quickly became a mouthpiece for Mussolini's regime in America, engaging in street brawls and other acts of violence against labor unions and anti-fascist groups. On one occasion, the League attempted to assassinate anti-fascist activist Carlo Tresca, but the Mafia intervened and forced the would-be assassin to kiss the organizer's hand. After years of violence, Mussolini decided to withdraw official support from the League in 1929, but Italian-American support for his regime persisted for more than a decade. The Mafia, however, remained staunchly anti-Mussolini, a fact which was to make them very useful once the United States entered the Second World War. In many American cities, Italian immigrants lived side by side with large Jewish communities, composed mainly of immigrants who had fled persecution in Eastern Europe. This community also spawned a variety of organized criminal groups, which inevitably clashed with the Italian Mafia over territory. Over time, however, the 2 groups drew closer together and began collaborating on various criminal activities. One relationship that epitomized this growing bond was between Italian mafioso Charles Lucky Luciano and Jewish gangster Meyer Lansky in New York City. In the late 1920s, as the Mafia began to coalesce in New York, Luciano found himself working closely with a Sicilian mafioso who had escaped Mussolini's purges. Having many Jewish friends and colleagues, including Lansky, Luciano quickly grew tired of the older mafioso's rabid anti-Semitism and old world values. In 1930, Luciano decided to purge the Mafia of its old guard during an ongoing power struggle known as the Castelmoronese War. This war resulted in the creation of the Italian Mafia, as we tend to think of it today, consisting of 5 New York families: Luciano, Mangano, Profasi, Bonanno, and Gagliano, and several regional families scattered across the United States. While Jews, Irish, and other ethnicities were still denied official membership in the Italian Mafia, the organization still maintained close business partnerships with these groups. One of the main causes uniting the Italian and Jewish mafias was their shared hatred of fascism. 1936 saw the formation of the German-American Bund, a domestic political organization aligned with Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime. As support for Nazism grew and anti-Semitic riots began breaking out in the streets, New York State Judge Nathan Perlman recruited Mayor Lansky and the Jewish Mafia to disrupt the Bund's activities throughout the late 1930s. Lansky's violent activities against the Bund put him in the spotlight as a top Jewish gangster and helped make possible his later collaboration with the US government. On December 8, 1941, the United States declared war on Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany, officially entering the Second World War. Early the following year, the German Kriegsmarine launched Operation Drumbeat, a concerted U-boat assault on shipping just off the American coast. On February 9th, the French ocean liner SS Normandy caught fire and capsized in New York Harbor while being converted to a troop ship, while a few months later the FBI apprehended a ring of German spies and saboteurs who had been landed by U-boats on Long Island. US naval intelligence suspected that saboteurs had set fire to the Normandy and were helping to refuel U-boats operating offshore using small boats. It was quickly becoming clear that criminals or not, the people running America's East Coast ports could not be ignored. In the spring of 1942, naval intelligence launched Operation Underworld under the direction of Captain Roscoe C. McCall and Lieutenant Commander Charles Radcliffe Haffenden. The operation set out to infiltrate the dock workers, but this proved difficult without Union connections. McCall and Haffenden thus arranged a meeting with Joseph Sox Lanza, a capo in the Luciano crime family and head of the Seafood Workers Union in Fulton Fish Market. While Lanza was willing to help the authorities, his authority was limited to the fish market. If the government wanted to infiltrate other unions, he said, they would need to talk to Lucky Luciano himself. But there was one small problem. At that time, Luciano was serving a 30-year sentence at Dunne prison in upstate New York, having been convicted for compulsory prostitution in 1936. All attempts at appeal had failed, making it likely that he would remain in prison for life. Though Luciano continued to run his empire from prison with the help of intermediaries like Mayor Lansky and Frank Costello, he longed to leave Dannemora, likening its isolation and cold climate to Siberia. The coming of the war and the problem of sabotage in American harbors seemed to bring the opportunity for escape that he'd been waiting for. Following a meeting with Mayor Lansky and naval intelligence, Luciano agreed to help the government by convincing various elements of the Italian-American community to side against the Axis powers. Naval intelligence officers were allowed to infiltrate dock workers' unions and hotels, bars, and clubs that were frequented by suspected spies, while the Mafia kept an eye out for saboteurs and broke up strikes that might interfere with the war effort. Navy agents even performed occasional collection tasks for the Mafia to keep up appearances. During all this, the government agreed to transfer Lucky Luciano to a prison in a warmer climate close enough to New York City to help facilitate the Mafia's cooperation with naval intelligence. While the Navy made it clear to Luciano that this was not a quid pro quo deal and that his prison sentence would not be commuted, Luciano, driven by his hatred of fascism, gave his full cooperation and helped keep the dock workers in line for the remainder of the war. That, anyway, is the official version of events. However, in Luciano's and Mayor Lansky's memoirs, both men claimed that Luciano was actually playing naval intelligence from the start. According to these accounts, Luciano had offered his services to the Navy much earlier in the war, but his advances were ignored. Wanting to stage an act of sabotage in order to attract the Navy's attention, Luciano turned to enforcer Albert Anastasia, who suggested burning the Normandy. Official records suggest that the Normandy fire was the main event which drove naval intelligence to approach the Mafia, indicating that they played played directly into Luciano's hands. However, Luciano's memoirs are known to be riddled with exaggerations and misinformation, and it is far more likely that the fire was accidentally started by a worker with a welding torch, as corroborated by multiple eyewitnesses. Whatever the case, the Mafia's wartime activities extended far beyond America's shores. In 1943, the Allies began preparations for Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily. Believing he could be of great service to the invasion effort, Lucky Luciano volunteered to land on Sicily and make contact with local Mafia families. While this request was denied, Luciano nonetheless succeeded in using his connections in America to establish communication with the Sicilian Mafia, allowing Allied agents to be infiltrated onto the island ahead of the invasion. He also convinced hundreds of Italian immigrants to provide naval intelligence with photos, sketches, and maps of the Sicilian coastline, allowing the landings to be more carefully coordinated. Operation Husky, which commenced on July 9, 1943, was an unqualified success, resulting in the capture of the island within a month and the collapse of Mussolini's fascist government. In an ironic twist of fate, Il Duce's decision to persecute the Sicilian Mafia resulted in his ultimate downfall. While US naval intelligence credited the swift success of the invasion to Luciano's Sicilian connections, such claims are highly exaggerated. Luciano was largely out of touch with the Sicilian Mafia, and the invasion proceeded so swiftly that any connections he did have would have likely had little impact on the final victory. While Luciano did play a key role in the invasion, his contributions were largely limited to providing intelligence on the Sicilian coastline. Despite this, and the Navy's insistence that he would not benefit from his collaboration, after the war, Luciano cited his wartime activities in an attempt to appeal his prison sentence. Naval intelligence repeatedly denied Luciano's claims until the Manhattan District Attorney's Office investigated and found them to be true. In 1946, Luciano was deported to Sicily under threat of imprisonment if he returned to America. The US government's collaboration with the Sicilian Mafia continued in the post-invasion years through the formation of the Italian Republic in 1946. While the Sicilian Mafia held different positions on Sicily's independence from Italy at first, the Mafia eventually played a role in quelling separatist and communist agitation. Meanwhile, Lucky Luciano enjoyed the boost to his reputation, but not his new life in Sicily, desperately yearning to return to America. In 1946, Meyer Lansky brought him to Cuba, where he opened a casino and resort and managed his old empire from closer to home, activities which inspired the plot of The Godfather Part 2. After barely a year in Cuba, however, Luciano was arrested and deported back to Italy, where he spent the remainder of his life, dying of a heart attack in Naples in 1962. It should also be noted that one of Luciano's Mafia rivals had a very different relationship to Mussolini than was the norm for the Mafia. Vito Genovese and Luciano were initially on opposite sides of the Castellammarese War, but sided with each other to end the conflict. After Luciano's arrest in 1936, Vito Genovese saw himself as his true successor and was willing to fight for his place in the Mafia. Plans changed in 1937 when Genovese fled to Italy to avoid a murder charge. In Italy, he supported Mussolini, even contributing $250,000 to build a new headquarters for the fascist party. Genovese was known to operate in the black market and even supplied party figures with drugs. In 1943, he helped the fascists by using his connections in New York to put a hit on the previously mentioned anti-fascist activist Carlo Tresca. Genovese's loyalties to Mussolini and his use of Mafia resources in Tresca's assassination angered Luciano, who tried to leverage his knowledge of Genovese's involvement in his negotiations with the US government. For his service to the fascist regime, Genovese was honored with the Commendatore del Re, a civilian honor. Genovese changed loyalties when the Allies invaded Italy. He served as an interpreter for the Allies while running black market operations using the occupation's resources. In 1994, Genovese was arrested for his black market activities. He was extradited back to the United States to face trial for his original murder charge back in 1937. The charges against Genovese were dropped in 1945 when the poisoning of a material witness against Genovese collapsed the case. Unlike Luciano, Genovese found himself free and able to continue where he left off in the criminal underworld. Truly, all is fair in love and war. The United States' wartime collaboration with the Mafia is emblematic of the desperate and often morally fraught lengths the Allies went to in order to secure final victory over the Axis powers. Luciano and Genovese had different reasons to cooperate with the Allies, and each yielded very different results. So I really hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching.